Take me back to my reversion. Unite the clans, I give thanks to each person. It's that same holy water that we immerse in. It's that same tradition that we all each versed in. United we stand and divided they win. They ignited in their plans and divided they sin. If you think about it and see us all for the same lands, their biggest fear is that we all remain friends. I got love for Team Marsh and y'all podcast. I got love for Michael Matt fans. Ryan Grant, Rick, Verity, Flanders, and Eric Sammons. Shout out to my boy, John Everton. Avoid Babylon. I got love for Anthony and Rob Speak On. If you try, you're persecuted, the same for the weak heart. Our roots go way back before the Genesis, the Greek ark, sweetheart. Yeah, this a mass of the ages. Shout out to Bishop Athanasius, Father Dave Nix, Red Pill, we out the Matrix. Haters. Ah. Yeah.
She's so nervous tonight. She's tapping the table like this, going like this. Okay. All right, guys. So, Art and Laraine, just so you guys know, I'm going to do a quick intro, but this is my wife's first time on air, and she doesn't want to be on air.
Aww.
She's like, I'm nervous. I don't want to be here. So, all right, everybody, welcome to Avoiding Babylon. Tonight, we are interviewing Art and Laraine Bennett. So, they wrote a book called The Temperament God Gave You. Now, Rob and I have been discussing temperaments for the past few months. We both read the book. Now, I read this book, and there were some things that popped out to me that when we're going to discuss this episode that were so shockingly accurate about my personality and my temperament that I could not even...
Shockingly accurate. Oh.
So, everybody please hit like, subscribe. I've never been nervous like this in my life. My wife is watching over me. I have to be on my best behavior. Usually I crack wise jokes by now, and I'm like...
we're upstairs. We're not in his little corner.
Yeah, we're not...
I can read that.
Corner of the basement. All right, Rob, you have anything to add? Am I missing anything?
No. Yeah, like you said, like the video, subscribe, share it, because unlike most of our videos, this one might actually include some useful information.
So we wanted to actually start off by just asking what is a temperament, and then what are the main temperaments, and how do they actually how do they work with people usually? Are they innate? Are you born with them? Are they nature versus nurture? What do you guys?
I'll start. Great. Thank you. By the way, thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The kind of bottom line on temperaments is how we tend to react or how we tend to respond to situations. We don't have to respond that way, but most of us have a tendency to respond a certain way. If we go to a party where I don't know anybody, I walk in, I go, how did I get here? What am I doing here? Why did I say yes to this? And Lorraine's going, who can I get to meet? I want to meet new people. There's someone else I don't know. I don't know anybody. So that's kind of temperament. That's temperament. How do I tend to react? I don't have to react that way. And over time, I can enjoy those kind of parties, and Laraine can be a little more demure if she wants to. So that's temperament.
It's not the whole of your personality.
Right. Yeah. Your character and personality would be very broad. It would entail, your upbringing, your education, your moral values, your faith.
So your personality does have to do with nurture.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and nature is the temperament.
Is the temperament part.
Right.
So real quick, there was one part. So we took your temperament test. So Rob, actually, you should put their online temperament quiz up and put it in the chat, because Rob sent me your online temperament quiz before I read the book. So this was the first taste I got of it. And part of so I am a sanguine choleric. Yep. Now,
great.
And she's a sanguine phlegmatic.
Oh,
so she has one of the most pleasant, sweet personalities. I've never known anybody not to adore my wife, where I am fun, but I'm a bit rough around the edges, right? So the choleric in me is a little bit rough, but the sanguine's very fun. So one of the things about sanguines that I read was a sanguine, because they always want to be the center of attention, they'll tease people, but then apologize right away. Now, you could not get a more accurate description of the things I've done.
That's good. That's good.
Trying to be the class clown and be funny, making fun of somebody.
Right, but you want everybody to love you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So she's the ultimate people pleaser.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Right.
now, what are the 4 temperaments?
Yeah.
Start.
Okay. Well, so we go back in our books, we talk about the temperaments in the classic sense. So the going all the way back to Hippocrates. And the reason that we're talking about temperaments using these kind of, the odd language of choleric or choleric, phlegmatic, sanguine, and melancholic, the reason we talk about it that way really is because there's this long tradition in Catholic spiritual writers and spiritual theologians, and there's popes, even a Pope John Paul I actually wrote about the 4 temperaments this way, and saints have talked about temperaments this way. And so we wanted to be consistent with that tradition. So like if you were talking to a contemporary psychologist or something, they probably would not be using these terms. So just that's like a caveat, just so people know. But anyway, so we're going back to this Catholic tradition, which is longstanding. And so the 4 are, as I said, choleric or choleric, phlegmatic, sanguine, and melancholic. And so do you want us to do like a really quick outline or?
Yeah, just like an outline of each temperament.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into talking about like people's secondary, because you don't always have a solid single temperament. You usually have a main and then a secondary. So
probably, yes.
Let's talk about those.
Yeah. So we could take turns. So one person's not always talking.
Go.
But okay. So
Anthony, you hear that?
Choleric. Is so they're like your classic leader type. They have quick, intense, long-lived reactions. Tends to make them very forceful, energetic, very enthusiastic, driven to follow through, sets goals, accomplishes goals. And sometimes they can be a little, they can be accused of like rolling over people when, they start a plan in motion or something like that. Or they can be, a little too pushy, a little too aggressive, or assertive, we like to say, those of us who are choleric. But anyway, so like.
That's choleric?
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
that's my
second charge. Like to take charge, even if they don't have any, experience in the area in which they decide to take charge.
Lots of confidence, even when there's no competence. Yeah.
We just like to take charge. We think
what is Robin in charge?
So actually, Rob. Rob, why don't you and Hope say your temperaments, just because Nicole doesn't know those.
Yeah.
So I'm phlegmatic with a little bit of melancholic, and Hope's actually interesting because from the longer test in the book, she tested melancholic with secondary of phlegmatic, but on the online quiz, it was the opposite. She tested like me, phlegmatic, melancholic.
But it was
it was like almost 50-50 though.
Yeah, it was almost perfectly 50-50.
Wow. Yeah. So okay, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah. So now, are there?
What are the?
Do you want me to go to the
He's
phlegmatic?
phlegmatic.
Yeah. Let's do phlegmatic.
Yeah.
By the way, Robert, Hope, I'm also phlegmatic melancholic, so
Yes.
Okay.
we'll just, okay. So phlegmatic is like 180 from the choleric, whereas the choleric is very self-confident on almost anything. Phlegmatic is a little bit cautious and wants to make sure, doesn't want to stand out too much, doesn't want to cause too many waves. Clerics like to lead. Phlegmatics more or less generally like to fit in. Happy to be team players. If it was a baseball team, we'd be a second baseman, whereas she'd be the starting pitcher or the shortstop, that kind of thing.
If I could.
Phlegmatics really put a heavy emphasis on peace, stability, no unnecessary waves or conflict. Sometimes phlegmatics will even take the blame for something that's not their fault if they think the strife will end or the conflict will end. It's like tend to be very agreeable. We always say to Catholic couples, keep having kids until you get at least one phlegmatic, because you want at least one kid that does what you say.
Yeah.
The other hand, if you say, "Wow, my first kid just does everything we say," but you got a phlegmatic, you may not be home free yet. That kind of thing. So they tend to be very agreeable and pretty humble. Their strength is probably empathy, humility, close to it. They're certainly not struggling too much with pride. The challenge, though, for the phlegmatic is conflict. And particularly as Catholics, we Christians, the cross is inevitable and critical, really, for growing in love and growing, period. So that's sometimes a struggle for the phlegmatics. We're going to have to stir things up a little bit, have to face a little bit of conflict. That's where the phlegmatics usually need some help. The other hand, they're great team players. So that would be kind of a quick and dirty on the phlegmatic.
I want to just say something real quick, because you said keep having kids until you have a phlegmatic. Now, the thing is, as parents, sometimes we get caught into saying, why aren't, we try our best to not do it, but to compare your children, right? It's like, why can't you be more like your brother? And that's an awful thing to say to your child, because they could develop a complex or something like that. But that's a very dangerous thing to do, because we are born with these different temperaments. So you will have a child who will be quicker to do what you say when you ask it. And then you may have one who's a little more aggressive and ready for conflict. But
understanding temperament is so helpful when you're raising kids, because then you don't fall into that trap. A lot of parents will say, gosh, this kid is so unlike I was, what did I do wrong? Or what's wrong with the child? It's either your tendency is to blame yourself or to blame the child. And this is like another option. It's like, wait, it could be just their God-given temperament. And the reason they react so differently from you is that, well, they have a totally different temperament. So, and just understanding that.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
off.
No, go ahead. Rob and I are dealing with a situation that we're watching a couple of friends having a disagreement right now. And so I'm mainly sanguine and he's mainly phlegmatic. Both of us are willing to compromise for diplomacy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we both are willing to all right, let's not push that issue, because the friendship means more to us than being right or being, getting our point across. Where the people that are going at it right now, I guess they would be more choleric, right? Because they're like, I don't care, I'm getting my point across. I don't care if the relationship gets destroyed.
It could be, but on occasion, it could also be a melancholic who is very, very, because melancholics have very deep, we didn't get into all the different four, but the melancholics can have this really deep-seated reaction that lasts for a very long time, and they can hold on to things for a really long time. And so they can also have they can be also, because they have the, they are pursuing the ideal. So the noble truth, right, and all that, they can be the ones who say, no, but this is right. And so I'm going to insist on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Melancholic.
One thing you described in the book was the melancholic dump. And that's one thing I've learned, with Hope here is she's slow to react. She lets it build, but there is a point she'll let you know what she's thinking.
Yeah,
she'll block you on Twitter. She'll block you on Twitter and not talk to you for 24 hours, and you don't even know what you did.
That's exactly right.
That's a real common. So let's just go to the melancholic really quickly.
Yeah,
melancholics are the most introverted, which doesn't mean they're the quietest necessarily. It just means they don't put their major energy into extroversion. They want to put it more into introversion. So sometimes I'm a card-carrying melancholic. We'll ruminate a little bit more on things or think about things before we say it. Yeah, so sometimes all of a sudden it kind of boils, and then boom, it's more of a burst rather than, wow, where did that come from?
Right.
I mean, I thought everything was kind of cool here. Or you were kind of, so we do think about things and we kind of turn them in our head a little bit.
And you also want it to be absolutely the way you think it should be, ought to be. It's very
ought and should really
are strong.
I mean, those are words
strong in the melancholic.
Therapists
they're like
those words because they're usually trouble, but they kind of automatically come. Like Laraine said,
they're like the stereotypical idealist, right?
Right.
And the Catholic Church really is a great religion for melancholic because we hold up a lot of ideals. I mean, we believe in absolute truth. We believe in beauty. The transcendentals. I mean, we're all in on that stuff, and most aren't. So a lot of melancholics are attracted, I think, to that feature of the Catholic faith. On the other hand, the challenge for the melancholic is flexibility. When to air things before you kind of let it get too much, ruminating as opposed to just acting, taking forever to make decisions sometimes because you keep going 9, 9, 9, 9. When does it kick into 1? You know, so those are challenges for the melancholic. I think also forgiveness is a little harder. Maybe for melancholics, might be easier for sanguines. We haven't discussed
Sanguines
that.
are easily. Yeah.
Maybe we should just do sanguine. Then we got all 4.
Yeah, so let's do sanguine because that's her and I are both sanguines, and I'm gonna say we're the life of the party.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And so that's the classic sanguine is, and the reactions are very quick and intense, but short-lived. So that makes the sanguine, very enthusiastic and very, oh, here's a new thing. And, they're like butterflies that flip from flower to flower, and they can easily forget what they were going to do. And like if you had a sanguine child, if you probably somebody has one, we had one, they run out the room, run out the door when they're going to school, and they have to come back in 10 times because they forgot their homework and they forgot their
this could be mistaken for ADD.
It could be. And in fact, it's actually one of the people who studied longitudinal studies on temperament. These 2 psychiatrists, that was what prompted them to really get into temperament, because they had melancholic parents with sanguine children, and the melancholic parents assumed that the child had a problem like with ADHD. And sometimes kids do. I mean, there are kids who have that, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes it is just a temperament issue. So.
I'm so amazed at how. I'm sorry, were you going to say something? No. Oh, I tend to talk over people a lot. But just when you do have 2 sanguines, what I'll say is, because you're so opinionated and you want to say that, like her and I, the short temper is there, so it's not. We're really fun, but then she comes at me if we're like, she doesn't hold back from saying anything, and it's the same vice versa. So
the opposite though?
No, so we have the same primary, we have different secondaries. So she is. Maybe we should before we get into that, we'll talk about the secondaries and how those can affect the primary.
So most people, I think. Actually, it's very rare that anyone takes the test and comes out with just one temperament.
Yeah, they would be difficult.
It's ever happened. Yeah. So the main temperament is your go-to reaction, all things being equal to most situations. But there's also a secondary temperament, which is also extremely competent that you could use. So let's take, for example, a high-profile figure. Let's take St. Paul and St. Peter. Okay, both cholerics. I mean, St. Paul rolls into town. He's gonna be real clear about what's going on here, what's happening. As was St. Peter. So both of them are coming into town.
They're both leaders.
And they're both natural leaders.
Both natural leaders.
They'll put their position out there. They're very demonstrative. Paul's writing letters. Peter's all over the Gospels. So that's classic choleric behavior. But the difference between the two is Paul would be choleric melancholic.
Yeah.
And there's rules here, and we're not fooling around. I mean, as he writes the Corinthians or whatever, he says, this is the way it is. I'm not happy the way things are going here, or I'm really happy the way things. You put me in prison, big deal, that kind of thing. So that's Paul.
But also he gets really angry and holds grudges.
Yeah, Mark is out, Barnabas is out, Mark is back in, Barnabas is back out. Yeah, so that's Paul. Yeah. So you see the choleric, but you also see that kind of. We got stuff we got to accomplish.
Ideals,
for reference, Nicole, that would be Eddie. So Eddie is choleric, melancholic. So that my cousin Eddie. So I'm just telling her my cousin.
Yeah.
So he would be that person. Where I think I'm more St. Peter, I would think.
Yeah. Right. And St. Peter, like, think about the many times that, he promises to, I'll follow you everywhere. He tells, Jesus, and then, hours later, he's denying he even knows him, so that's that kind of, up and down. He's very impulsive, impulsively, steps out onto the lake, and then he begins to sink, when he takes his eyes off of Christ. But still, that's a very sanguine kind of thing. Yeah. There was also one instance where Paul, I can't remember where this is. I should look it up. But where he was giving some talk, a long homily or something. He's going on and on and on, and a kid falls out the window and dies, I think. Do you know this one?
Paul was talking.
Yeah, when Paul was talking, because as a classic melancholic, he wasn't thinking about his audience. Now, a sanguine would be thinking about his audience. Like you may be talking a lot, but you're gonna also get feedback. Right. Whereas Paul probably was on this long homily type of thing, and he's going to say what he's going to say until the kid falls out the window, So
now, are there temperaments that tend to clash and not get along? Like, are there, so especially in spouses, I'm thinking, right? So are there temperaments that if you're, is it opposites attract, or is it like?
I think it's both. I think people all kinds. We know people who a lot of people who say, like, when we give a talk on temperament, couples come up and they go, "Oh, we're just like you. We're opposite," because we're completely opposite. Mm-hmm. So I'm a choleric sanguine and he's phlegmatic melancholic. So we're completely opposite. But people will say, "Yeah, we're just like that." And initially they do attract, it's like when I first met him, I'm like, ooh, who's this, deep thinker, and, and he's brooding over there and then looking intense and, and mysterious, so I'm really attracted. And then after, a few years, I'm like, how come you never want to go to any party? And so that's kind of like, opposites attract, but also people who are the same. Like, we know lots of people. In fact, I remember
a marriage therapist. I remember a couple came. They were both melancholic, off the charts melancholics. I think one phlegmatic, one. Can't remember their secondary. So they had a problem. The problem they had was they didn't know how to be spontaneous. So they came into schedule being spontaneous because they didn't had everything planned out. So I said, well, next time you come in, why don't you bring your calendars? We'll go over. And we have our calendars. We went over it, and so I was encouraging them to set up. For example, they had trouble with things like date night, or they had trouble with going on vacation and stuff like that. And so generally having the same temperament has the asset or the deficit of tending to respond the same way. Yeah. But then something kind of a little bit different, like vacations or something where you need a spontaneous response, it was harder for them. So we gave them some guidance on.
And so they'll be getting along swimmingly at first, with that.
They
totally agree.
Things the way I do, things like I do, that kind of thing. So on the initial reaction, it's usually quite harmonious. But then as it plays out, as it plays out,
or you might have a child that's different.
Well, that's right. That came up earlier. I think you mentioned that. Yeah, I mean, pretty likely, almost inevitable, you will, and that could become a challenge because you have a way of seeing the world, you have a way to react in the world you're very comfortable with, and then boom, you have a kid or a spouse or somebody who has a different way. So maybe you're more introverted and you got a really extroverted spouse that wants to kind of hit the town and go right, or vice versa. Those things have to be worked out. I think the key, though, sometimes I give consulting on marriage and stuff. I would never say a priori that certain temperaments can't work together. The key, though, really is just radical respect. I mean, respect goes so far anyhow in marriage that even though you're different than me, babe, or you have a different take on things, I respect that. I won't always agree with it, but I do respect it, and I want you to feel like I really do respect how you see things, and we'll work it out. But to keep the connections on the bond has to be so strong in marriage. But certainly opposites can attract or complement each other. And I think sometimes thinking about business organizations, if someone's got to have the big vision to get the company going and growing. But somebody better be paying the bills and watching the numbers and watching the details. So I think we all want to be a well-rounded person and well-rounded as a couple too. We want to be able to handle all sorts of stuff. So the temperaments just help you identify what's maybe really working, maybe where we can need some help. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's I mean, I could see even from our relationship, because we are both so spontaneous. We just want to drop of a hat. We want to go away for the weekend and just have a weekend together, right? We will go and spend days on my boat that doesn't have a cabin. Like, we put a camper top on and we're like, let's go sleep out
in the middle of a big storm.
In the middle of a big storm. But where the problem comes in is because you have that, it's very hard to discipline yourself with spending money, and like, these are real issues that come up when you don't have that well-rounded way to. So now
that's like our daughter and son-in-law who are maybe are listening, but they both have strong sanguine tendencies. And we were joking about how they had like the most bridesmaids and groomsmen of anybody. Like you couldn't even fit them all into the picture, the wedding picture. It's like
So many friends. Yeah.
so many friends. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So it's like now you can. So just because we have these temperaments does not mean that it's ingrained in you, right? I mean, it's your initial instinct, but you can. So there are saints that have died to themselves to the point where they change their temperament. Is it right?
Exactly. You don't change it, but that's the whole goal, is to actually grow in virtue. So we want to become Christ-like, ideally. And so like St. Ignatius, for example, he's very pugnacious, and as a young man. And they said at the end of his life, you would have thought he was the most meek and humble man you ever met. And you wouldn't have necessarily known how he was initially as a young man. So basically, but what happened was he didn't change his temperament, but he grew in virtue. He became more Christ-like, which is what we're all called to do. And there's that other example, which was a saint who was always clawing under the. Yeah, he was supposed to be so meek and
St. Francis de Sales. Yeah, so he's a bishop. He can't even go into his own city, because the Protestant Reformation. And also, and a real harshness. Calvinism is spreading all through France and Switzerland. Real harsh. Everybody's kind of being talking themselves, and everybody's cranky and grumpy all the time. So he was very relaxed. Very trying to spread this love of Christ, a sense of mercy that was kind of going out of style. But they discovered, so people would meet when there's the most gentle guy, but they realized when he died and they were kind of moving his furniture underneath his desk, his table, he had scratched. Sometimes he was so.
He was trying so hard not to be angry.
Show his anger. Yeah. And so he had to struggle with that, but he, I guess, at least overcame it. Yeah. If you read if you read a saint's lives, at the end of their lives, it's very difficult to identify the temperament. But if you get at the beginning of your life, you can identify it pretty easily. Like Lorraine does some writing on St. Therese of Lisieux, and at the beginning you can get much more a better sense. But the temperament theory is you don't really so much change your temperament; you grow by acquiring new virtues. So let's say I'm double introvert, melancholic, phlegmatic. I've really had to work hard to be a little more outgoing, and I went and had a job as a president and CEO and had to raise all this money and ask all these people for money, and it just killed me. I was dying. But if I didn't do it, I would get fired. If I didn't do it, I would languish, and it was a Catholic thing for the poor. So I had to learn it. So I had to read books on it. I had to get a few mentors on it, and they coached me up so that I could make those very difficult decisions that you have to make. So I had to learn as a phlegmatic that conflict is good. It's very, very, very frequent. And if I freak out every time it happens, I'm not going to be much of a man or a husband or a person or a Catholic. So I had to learn that. Whereas you cholerics, you kind of go, bring it on. When Delano Roosevelt used to have the Republicans over for breakfast so he could fight them every morning. And I like to fight with these sons of guns every morning. And then he was ready to go. Well, that's one way to do it, but that's not my temperament. So the temperaments cue us where to grow, which is kind of nice. So where do I need to grow? Maybe you guys, if you're both double sanguine, budgeting detail, that's going to be a challenge, but that's where you need to grow. That's where
Rob, you have a bunch of questions. I don't want to talk over you.
Well, talking about the saints growing and it, strengthening their weaknesses. I found it interesting when I took the quiz that it mentioned that St. Thomas Aquinas was phlegmatic melancholic, because one of the weaknesses of phlegmatics is a lot of times like motivating yourself, right? And motivating yourself to do work. And yet the man wrote, the Summa Theologiae, the Summa Contra Gentiles. I mean, his body of work is incredible. He must have had to really work hard to motivate himself to do that.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, Thomas never took the test. It's just kind of you try to back into it. Yeah. I mean, being a Dominican, though, if the abbot says, you know what, you're a little smart guy. I want you to tackle this problem. I want you to keep on it. I mean, that would have happened. And things were structured such that everybody realized he's the smartest guy in every room. So let's just keep having him. And, the different issues of the 12th century, he was the man on that. So probably he was pulled into it. But one of the things I think is very phlegmatic about Thomas is that characterization that he always gave the best argument of the enemy.
To his opponent.
Of his opponent. Yeah. He made them seem so strong. And that is that would be a classic phlegmatic quality of empathy. Say, I want to beat your best argument. So let me help you here. Let me tighten your argument up here. Now I'm going to take it down.
No.
But, no, because Christ is God, is right. But I thought that quality would be if you were who else can be as smart as him? But that quality of really having radical respect for your opponent, even though theologically you're on the other side, would be a kind of a classic phlegmatic quality, I think. Yeah.
Another observation I would make about the phlegmatic, I know I am rough around the edges and hard to deal with. Rob is always patient with me, but if I had ever pushed him to that point and he had to say something to me, it would be like, it would mean so much. Like I would take it so seriously, because if I ever pushed him to the point where he had to say something, it would be like earth shattering to me. So I would stop dead in my tracks. Like, oh boy, I really
have that effect, Rob.
I'm saving it for a good time.
I've actually texted him. I texted him one time and I said, "You don't have to say anything to me. I know already beforehand." I said, "I promise you, I know. You don't have to say anything." He goes, "Okay." Nicole or Hope, do you guys have anything you wanted to ask? I mean, we're not getting off. I just wanted to make sure we're not talking over you completely. Hope, come on. I know you have comments here.
No.
Nope. All right, if something comes, just get it out. But Rob and I have a whole bunch of questions. So Rob, you
one thing. So Hope and I are both some combination of phlegmatic and melancholic, and
right.
And we our oldest child is almost 4, and we're pretty sure he's sanguine, at least. But how do you tell with a 3.5-year-old whether they're just being a rambunctious toddler, 3.5-year-old, and how do you tell if it's that or if it's really their temperament? How do you tell the temperament at those younger ages when they can't take an online quiz?
Yeah, I know. That's a really good question. I think we kind of determined it in like hindsight a little bit, because we knew, like, for example, our phlegmatic son, it was so clear even from the time that he was a baby that he was phlegmatic, but we didn't actually identify it until later. We just kind of looked back and we go, oh yeah, he was always just happily sitting in his little bouncy seat. He never cried. He never had an issue. He never was like, he was always getting lost in the shuffle because, things would be swirling all around, and everything's happening in the house. And he'd be just quietly sitting there, and he was always so good, but
3 or 3.5. That might be a little,
you might be able to though.
The thing is, you can't, because the experience is so limited.
Yeah,
you
that's
can't
true.
Clearly delineate between what's environmental and what's kind of natural.
Yeah.
But I mean, even today we were with one of our grandkids. Actually, today with our 5 of our grandkids, where we spent some time with one, and he's just learning to walk, and he gets up and boom, he goes down. He's up, boom, he goes down. Up, boom, he goes down. Boom, he goes down. I go to myself. I'm sorry, do you want to say something?
No, I was going to say that he's. You could tell he's extroverted though.
That's what I was going to say. Is like,
okay.
No discouragement, not a hint of discouragement.
Yeah.
I'm up. I'm going to do it. I'm up. I'm going to do it.
He never cries.
Hard not to think that he's probably more extroverted. I mean, he just seems like he's attacking the world, and he's just not going to be even slowed down by.
And he always smiles when
whimpering.
Any new person comes in the room.
Yeah, he's very open to strangers, not strangers, but people he doesn't see that often come in.
Yeah.
So I it's tempting just to think these are pretty extroverted qualities this little guy's got, but he's only 1 year old. So I mean,
he's one.
It's a work in progress.
But you can see some things. Yeah.
Since reading the book, it's like almost like every relationship I have now, I'm like trying to size up the temperament. I'm like, all right, I think I know who you are. I think I know who you are.
It clarifies it though too, which is awesome.
You tried to guess what I was.
So I tried to take the test for her, and I must have gotten a couple wrong. So I got her. I got her phlegmatic side, but I must have answered a few things wrong because I mean, she is majority sanguine, and so she is like the ultimate. She's always happy and she doesn't want conflict. Like, so it's like,
I'm not a very sweet person. Yeah.
She has conflict with me. Don't get me wrong. But
I think that's probably on your side, Anne.
But I've never met anyone who doesn't adore her. Like, people will meet her and they're like, they want her to be her best friend after meeting her once or twice, you know?
Yeah.
I did have a question though. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. Like, so there's the main, and
primary.
then right.
Primary,
So
secondary, right?
so what is the reason that there's the secondary part?
Well, I think just because
it would just be too, because obviously also if you're there's different things that come into play. Like, it's not like if you're this, you're totally that description. But so the second part is just kind of fine detailing it.
Well, I think it just seems like that most people tend to be like, we read when we were writing the very first book, The Temperament God Gave You. I've been reading this like book written in 1935, like by this priest, and he was talking about the 4 temperaments, and it was like, a very small book, but it was so filled with interesting points. But he brought out that fact that most people just are a blend, and that if you were, and though he acknowledged that there could be people who are just one temperament, they would be so intense. Like, that temperament would be so overpowering for that person, in a sense. Like, it would be just maybe too much. And so that's why God lets us have a couple.
Yeah, like a choleric, a pure choleric is very difficult to deal with. So, it's
exactly.
There's a specific word you could use for pure choleric, I bet.
That's but it's so I don't mind sharing my faults. It's like, I will be the happiest person in the world and have a great time, but once something really does get to me, it's like I go so far. I wound up having to apologize because I just went too far with just like when I feel like somebody wronged me, I'm like I have to be the one to straighten this out, and then I feel terrible about it right afterward. And I wish I didn't open my mouth, and I'm like,
but that's the pleasant part of your temperament, is that you at least you have the sanguine aspect to help you.
So it kind of balances it out a little bit.
Be willing to apologize and and that sort of thing.
So
so Saint Jerome, for example, was probably choleric, melancholic or something, but he was really rough around the edges.
He was cantankerous,
he was cantankerous, exactly. So he had to go live by himself in in a cave.
Go right there. Go compile the Bible.
Go read the Bible.
Don't bother me.
Right, but it shows you why God does give people different gifts, because that's kind of, you do need somebody with that temperament to go and compile the Bible. It's like, I could never do something like that.
So by the way, that's the thing, right? So that kind of probably melancholic quality of really high quality, and this is baloney, this is the right thing, making the tough calls, high ideals, this is the word of God.
Maybe he was melancholic.
I think those qualities are absolutely necessary. Whereas if he was more sanguine, phlegmatic, I got to please this group here, that group there, and it might have more of a more tempted more of a political kind of thing. So I think that's right, and that's why these are gifts that God gives us.
Right
now, it's also kind of curious He doesn't give us all the gifts.
Right,
and that was a discussion that was between Catherine of Siena
and God.
She had this magic bat phone where she would write letters to God or talk to God, and he would answer, which was great. And so one of the things she asked was, forever grateful for this question. She goes, "Well, tell me, what's the problem with creating everyone and just giving them everything they need?
All the natural virtues." She asked, "Why didn't we have all of them?
Why didn't you do that?" And he answered that question. And do you want to answer it? Or
go ahead.
Well, in a summary, in effect, he says, well, here's the deal. If I give anyone all the things they want, all the virtues they want, all the qualities they want, they'll be so prideful they'll lose their soul.
And we have to have need of other people. We need other people. That's the point. We're not just these isolated, perfect little individuals here, So.
Well, I think anybody being honest with themselves. I mean, I know I've actually been like, God, why did you make me like this? Like, what? Like, anytime I make a really big mistake, it's like, God, why did you make me like this? Like, why did you have to give me this make this such a difficult part of myself that it's hard to deal with this thing, but
Yeah.
I guess that you need to actually face those things to grow in virtue also.
Right.
Right. And also because God gave them, he wants you to love him with your whole self.
Yeah.
You uniquely you. That is what, like, that's what Saint Therese was saying, that she was going to become a great saint, and he was going to make it happen. It's not like you're going to make it happen. It's not like God was going to make it happen. And she had that total trust. And her mom said about her, she was so stubborn when she was a little kid that if she had put her in the cellar all day, she would never change her mind. Like if she said no, that she wasn't going to do something, there was no changing her mind. And so her mom wrote that about her. And not that she actually put her in the cellar, but if she were to put her in the cellar. But she was very, very stubborn, which contributed to her ability to become a great saint. So God gives us everything we need.
Now, is there a temperament that has a more difficult time facing the reality of who they are, or like really doing a good self-assessment and being honest with themselves? Like for me, I'm easy to go to confession. I'm pretty honest with my pitfalls and some of my weaknesses. Like when I read the list of weaknesses, it's like insincerity and all these things. Rob, you have the picture of my weaknesses, but it's like I laughed at them because I said that is me that you described when I saw those weaknesses. But I think I would imagine some people have a harder time really admitting certain things to themselves.
I don't know. Everybody can struggle with pride, right?
Yeah, I think pride is the real hard thing for us to see ourselves. Sometimes we fall in love with our image of ourselves, and we don't really fall in love with ourselves. We fall in love with the image of our spouse. We don't really fall in love with our spouse. And I think that the temptation to not really take a hard look at yourself and what you're doing, I think that's everybody. I think probably original sin. We've talked about that before. Sometimes the difficulty of seeing another person's opinion is kind of original sin. We just can't get outside of ourselves and see that anyone else could see things differently than I do or experience things differently than I do. This isn't relativism, by the way. It's nothing to do with that. It's just that there's different ways of approaching the truth. And the temperaments are kind of handy for that as well. But I think the capacity for self-delusion, I don't think any temperament has an inside track on that. It would just probably come out a little bit differently. That's all.
Right.
I think how they would struggle with that. I think, but I don't think there's any inside track on one being more self-delusional than another.
What I think is when you take the temperament quiz online, it's easy to read so you give two sections. You say these are your the things that are good about your personality, but then you see the weaknesses. Now, I think the weaknesses really do a great job of describing what you show. Like, okay, so this is mine. I actually found it. It's attention-seeking, changeable, chatty, distractible, disorganized, emotional, tendency to exaggerate, faddish, fickle, flighty, frivolous, forgetful, gossipy, inconstant, insincere, scattered, sensual, smart-alecky, superficial, prone to vanity, and undisciplined. Like that. If I'm being honest, that is me. Like. So you do give some of the great things now. So like one of the good things is my ability to connect with people balances out the domineering and relentless temperament of the pure choleric because I have the sanguine mixed in.
Yeah, right.
When I read hers, it was unbelievable because it even said what kind of spouse she would have, where she would have a spouse who was kind of a little domineering and, took charge of things and wasn't a pushover. And it's like, she got exactly who she was supposed to get.
Yeah, we wrote the book with Nicole, Marna. But again, by the way, just to be clear, these strengths and weaknesses are not moral. They're not sins. They're kind of psychological tendencies, kind of where you're kind of being leaning to go to. And you want to go after the weaknesses, and you don't want to be bully with your strengths. I mean, you want to become a well-rounded person, and I think Christ will give you challenges that will allow you to grow. And the cool thing about temperaments, you only have to leave your strengths behind when you grow into a different virtue. One time when one of our teenage kids were teenagers, and I remember Lorraine was listening to them talk about something. probably told you about this. So she was listening to him, and Laraine, likes to talk. She's got strong ideas. She's studied philosophy. She's the smartest person in most of the rooms. So but she was just sitting there and just listening to her daughter talk about whatever it was that was bothering her. I can't remember what it was. And I just saw her being so patient. She wasn't interrupting. She was just listening. And I go, oh my God, because I know my wife. That is so hard.
Yeah, normally I'd be interrupted.
I mean, so that was an act of love. That was an act of
Ray,
love.
me and you are two peas in a pod. You don't understand.
No, it was like an act of love because our child was a teenager. They got to start to figure stuff out. They got to start thinking for themselves. They got to start looking at their options. Where you know the answer to most of these problems. It's study hard or just do what I say is usually the answer. But so just watching her very patiently, quietly, letting her work at her, being there with her and letting her work it out. And I go, oh my God, what an act of love. This is beautiful. So that's going against her temperament.
Yeah.
But that's genuinely growing. But, as you know your temperament, you'll know, maybe as a phlegmatic, I might think something is really wrong or bad, but I might be tempted just to keep my mouth shut. I don't want to cause any waves, that kind of thing. Sometimes that's not the way to go. Sometimes I have to call it out. I have to be unpopular. I have to say something is going to make me nervous and perspire, and I'm not going to like it, but it's got to be called out. Or somebody have to confront your kids, and sometimes your spouse too, or you look in the mirror. And that's not easy for phlegmatics. But when you do it, when you turn an obstacle into a challenge for growth, it's extremely exciting. And your whole personality and character starts to branch out. And then ideally in love, you're supported by your spouse to help you make those growth moves. Like, oh, I was so proud of you, the way you just listened to her when she was working this stuff out. So it's all about growth and intimacy, I think, especially in marriage, and so just try to put anybody in a box.
Yeah. Well, I could see even, okay, so I'm pretty easy to be on camera and stuff. Rob was a little hesitant. Since Rob and I started doing this, he's been coming out of his shell and becoming a class clown sanguine a little bit, which I don't think he was expecting to happen.
It's definitely an act, though. I mean, I have to force myself to do it. It's fun, but it's not me.
Point?
Yeah.
Right. But I don't know if I could. Don't confuse the beginning steps for inauthenticity. I mean, think of anything you've had to learn. Like I remember I was on a basketball team and I was 6'2" and I was 8th grade and my coach goes, Ben, there's a problem with it. You're reaching on the bench. Ben, why are you on the bench? You can't go left. Well, I can go right. You can't go left. You can't go left. You can't be out there. So you let me know.
Are you
when you
Zoolander?
go left. I can't play a kid that goes the same direction all the time. So all right, so I'm inauthentically bouncing the ball on my left. I was hitting my heel, hitting my shoe. And 5-6 weeks later, I can go left. So watch out for calling a change of behavior, quote, inauthentic. It's just awkward. It's awkward. Like when you teach your kid to drive, before you get out of the driveway, it takes like half hour because they have to check the mirror. And then you fast forward a year later and they're off the races because they got it down.
My son just passed his road test today.
Oh,
His
great.
road test today. So before he takes it, I said, say a prayer. Because my older brother didn't say a prayer before his road test and he failed.
Right.
And he regretted it so much. My mother told him, say a prayer. He goes, oh, stop it. God doesn't care if I pass my road test. He didn't pass. He was like, the next one he went, he goes, Mom, can you say a prayer with me?
That's great.
I'm taking cooking classes from Laraine. I'm the worst cook. It's horrible. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But I mean, eventually I probably will get some of it down. So the initial steps being awkward or feeling fake, you got to watch out for that. You got to be a little more choleric. Just go right through the stop sign and just make it happen.
Do you guys have any advice for someone how to work on their weaknesses and maybe how to challenge themselves, like how to get themselves out of the box that they're in with their natural instinct to do certain things?
Mm-hmm.
I would say just the way you put it is the way neuroscience is really good on this. If you see something as an obstacle and you approach it with dread, you're almost halfway. It's already got you.
Yeah.
However,
Fight or flight.
Reframe it. If you reframe it, that's the term that clinicians are using with the new neuroscience coming out, as an opportunity for growth. Then you get out of fight or flight. If you see it with dread, your only options are fight or flight. Oh, I hate this, or I'm going to put it off forever, procrastinate. If you see it as an opportunity for growth, if you flip it, then you go, all right, if I can just be a little quieter with my kid next time they tell me about a problem, I'm going to try to keep my mouth shut for 5 minutes. It's going to be torture to do that. I'm going to do that. See if I can do it. And if I can do it, that'll make me a better dad and a better person. All right, bring in the kid and go for it. So that is the biggest change. When you see things as opportunities for growth. Now, growth means you're going to If you decide to run 10 miles, you're going to be really sore tomorrow if you're not injured and stuff. But that soreness means you really work yourself. That's awesome. That's great. You're getting in shape.
Are you
So
telling me,
that's why you have
I
to
need to go on a silent retreat?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
That's what Laraine does, go on a silent retreat, and then she and Fred go off to the side and go chat
Yeah,
half the time, right?
that's what I
got
did.
caught, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
That-
silent retreats are
I would
hard for
I would find that I would find the other sanguine. We
Yeah.
would meet, I got you, and then we'd like
Yeah.
sneak off
Rules aren't
and
for them. The rules aren't
go
for them.
walk down the street, at a distance so nobody's gonna see us, and then we start talking.
It's so
Yeah,
funny how like it really. I'm telling you, every interaction I've had since reading the book, this guys, if you've never read one of their books, I mean, I can't tell you how great of a book this is. It is so like insightful and just gives you these little insights into why people handle things the way they do, and it really does. It makes you more patient with someone when you know that they're probably handling it that way because of their temperament, and it's not just they're being a jerk
that's
or
just their natural.
yeah, it does help you with being a little bit more patient with people.
Can I say something?
Of course.
I like what you said, the advice that you gave, and I feel like maybe just it spoke to me in being present in that moment and deciding to maybe take the more challenging or not natural approach to try and see if the outcome might be different. Like even with teenagers, and just giving them their space rather than interjecting right away and just giving your opinion right away, and maybe just being more present to make a different reaction than you would normally.
Yeah, you have to challenge yourself. So if your initial instinct is to react a certain way, maybe you need to, especially if you have a repeat problem with that child, I would imagine.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Nicole.
Well, not even problem, but just anything, to get the reaction that you might want to get, you might have to change something in yourself.
So here, let's
interrupting me.
I'm just kidding. Here's why I want to say. So
here's why.
So she, all right. So my wife has I think like, all right, so she, when somebody does something for her, she goes so out of her way to show how grateful she is for it. And I think when people don't show that gratitude back, she gets a little offended by it, not realizing that that's not because somebody may be ungrateful. That may be just because somebody doesn't show affection the same way she does, or gratitude.
Or they could be just not polite people. Like some people aren't aware of how important it is to express their thanks, thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so maybe they weren't raised well or something. No, I'm sorry.
No, are you talking about like the kids?
I try to tell, well, especially with kids.
Hi, Jake.
With the kids, sometimes I have to remind them that they're teenagers, and teenagers are very selfish.
Why are they responding like that? Why are
they're
they
selfish?
not?
Teenagers only think of themselves. So.
Oh yeah, they're going through.
You have to write a second book on how to deal with the temperaments of your children.
Well, we have a book.
That's our third book.
Yeah, so they have several books. So
Oh, really?
That's their third book.
Ta-da, here it is.
Great.
You
yeah,
asked
we're gonna
for
have
it.
to get that one.
Awesome.
So
I gave it to you. There it is.
Nice.
I gave your kids. This is
Great.
This is more like really goes through younger. Yeah, I mean, like learning styles that are related to temperament as well. So younger. This is good for younger kids. But yeah.
So Jake Tate asks, have you ever analyzed the temperaments of any saints based on their life and writings? Seems like some achieved holiness by exaggerating theirs and some suppressed it.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, again, I think we have to, like Art said earlier, you have to kind of go back to their childhood a lot of times to see what actually their temperament was, because by the end of their lives, most of them really are very Christ-like, it seems to me. But like for example, there's like Saint Teresa of Avila. She's so choleric, sanguine in the beginning. She's like, she drags her little brother off. She's going to die as a martyr. And she drags her, I think he was like 3 or something, she drags him with her, we're going to go off, and she, and then then when she was first in the convent, she was just like, she was always very chatty. She loved to she would sit in the room. They had it was a relaxed kind of monastery. It was where everybody just went, because if you were a young woman at that, that's what people did. And so she's in this convent, but she's very chatty. She has a lot of people visiting. Like she had men visiting, like they would just, she was very attractive. She was so, and then she realized like one day, I don't know how it happened, but she just realized that this was wrong. And she was not actually, behaving in the way that a Carmelite ought to. And then she reformed the whole thing. Yeah. I feel like you have to go back to their youth more, although I guess, as Jake mentioned, some maybe emphasize their temperament later, but I can't think of an example exactly.
Maybe Blessed Carl. I mean, he's known as a peacemaker, right? And his early life, he seemed that way too. So maybe he was just really phlegmatic.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah, I think reading the lives of the saints are
good.
Because you'll see how they inherit certain skills and deficits, and then how they overcome them. It's a great.
You can even see it in St. Paul. In St. Paul, in his early writings, he's very bold. But you even see where he starts saying, "Even me, the least of all the saints," and then by the end of his writings, he says, "I am the greatest of all sinners."
That's right. I mean,
really, you see, he toned down a little.
That
development there.
There was another question. Oh, my oldest.
Yeah. So my oldest is a sanguine. What is the best way to help him grow in virtue over the vices that are more predominant with his temperament? I need that one too. That's a great question, Enoch.
Grow in virtue.
So as a sanguine, we have particular. We are just drawn to certain weaknesses. What are good ways to overcome some of those? And
especially as a parent of one.
Right. Well, that's a really, so one of the things we noticed about sanguines is that they are the most likely to need to learn through experience, which is sadly, because like we would tell our melancholic, we would say, oh, if you do this, like you better, follow the rules here. And they're like, oh yeah, we're going to follow the rules, no question. And then the sanguine, would always he would park in the towaway zone. And you think, okay, maybe the first time he might learn, no, he did it. I don't know. He's a couple times, at least 3 or 4 times.
My sanguine brother has gotten 9 seatbelt tickets. He just hasn't learned.
I mean, it's like, so probably by now that he's married and has a child, he might not park in the towaway zone anymore. But because his wife wouldn't let him. I know. But he's always like, I'm only going to be here for 5 minutes. Nobody's going to come. They never tow away anyway. So this is classic sanguine, Aaron,
I will say this. I think you're crazy. I think phlegmatic is one of the most amazing temperaments. It's like you have patience. You have this.
What's funny though is as a phlegmatic, when I read the different descriptions, it does feel more harsh, but maybe that's just the natural lack of self-confidence we have as phlegmatics.
Yeah, you're crazy.
I don't know.
I can tell you from working with you, you're one of the easiest people I've ever worked with. You're the least annoying person I've ever known in my entire life. People get on your nerves.
He talks about you all the time.
Rob, you're probably my favorite person.
He always talks, so.
I do talk about him.
You say he's not annoying. You don't live with him.
No, I'm annoying. Believe me.
Actually, that's one of the things we tried to do with our first book. That was one of the main things, because Conrad Hawk's book, he was down on phlegmatics.
Yeah,
he didn't even finish
just one paragraph.
He didn't even finish that whole book.
So he didn't finish it because it seems really short for phlegmatic.
He either he died after he put that last period or the fifth paragraph, or he had nothing to say. I don't know which, but
we wanted to
the card-carrying phlegmatic, I felt like I would say I think cultures have temperament preferences. Like we used to live in Germany in the 80s.
Oh yeah.
And we said, wow, we're in melancholic land.
Yes.
It's melancholic headquarters.
The trains run on time.
I used to go to Korea. There was another place was I thought radically melancholic, and everything is very strict and disciplined. And then, you know,
So then you have
Italy, it's pretty sanguine. I think the American culture is a little bit down on the phlegmatic, because I think American culture really reveres choleric, sanguine, choleric.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be. That's what people think they should be and want to be. And so I think there's a little bit of truth to that, and maybe we could,
the culture being that way. But we tried in the book to be fair.
we could maybe maybe could have done a better job of that too. I don't know, but you know, I'm a phlegmatic. I'll admit we could have done a better job. Not a big deal. So I think it's.
I'm not going to say that.
Yeah, I know she won't.
You wouldn't, would you?
However, one of the things we do try to stress, maybe not enough, is any temperament can be a good parent, can be a good leader.
Can be a saint.
I used to think maybe sanguines would be better. You know, even sales. It's like the temperament only tells you where you're a little more intense.
Or easier.
Intense and prioritize.
When you're
Doesn't mean
natural
you can't
instinct.
balance your checkbook if you're sanguine, but you might have to, focus a little bit more on it. Or when I was, president CEO, I had to come up to people and ask them for money. It was terribly difficult as a phlegmatic, but I learned to do it. It didn't come naturally. It took me 5 years or so, and I got into it, because these are just skills you can just learn. I didn't know how to dribble basketball with my friend. It's more like that. It's just some people get stuff quicker and easier.
Well, it's also the intensity of the drive is what you're saying. Like a lot of times melancholics feel like they have the short shrift because they're they think, oh, I'm not friendly. Are you saying I'm not friendly because I'm introverted? No, we're not saying that. We're just saying, your drive to be with people, to be sociable, or to be in a social situation, your drive to do that is less than a sanguine's drive for it. The sanguine's drive is huge. And the melancholic is over here. So the melancholic is very happy staying at home. Melancholics, phlegmatics, they're very homebodies. They love to be home. But that doesn't mean you're not sociable.
You're not phlegmatic. That's why. You're
I'm like, I'm
secondary
both of that.
phlegmatic.
It's just the intensity of the drive is different.
Yeah.
That's all.
So Lucy is asking which temperament makes you a crazy Democrat.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're saying, right?
Oh, good
Have
question.
you observed any casual relationships between temperaments and political views? So, I think that's what she's asking.
I don't think so. I mean, I would say Clinton and Reagan were both sanguine. They're both they're happy guys. They loved everybody they met. I talked to somebody who went golfing. He was a caddy for Clinton. Clinton talked to him the whole time. He's a caddy for guys, but Clinton just got to talk. He just got to talk to people. And I've heard the same thing about Reagan. If he sat next to him in an elevator, he just yakety yak. Lincoln, Republican. Lincoln would definitely be melancholic, but I was going to say Carter. Of course, those days, Republican Democrats probably don't mean what they do now. Carter was very introverted. So I don't think so. It might play out differently, but I think there's plenty of choleric Democrats and plenty of choleric Republicans and vice. I guess I haven't thought that through, but I don't think so. Yeah,
you're talking about presidents.
I should ask about
but
politics.
She was saying politics. Yeah, but like
we were just saying, is there any kind of casual relationship between that would lead you to a certain party? But I think
that I don't know. I think maybe it has to do with religion though.
Because, I would think so.
Yeah, because like if you're religious, I think you're
gonna lean right.
Yeah.
Well,
I think so.
Well, more Catholics voted Democrat for president.
Oh, but are they religious Catholics? Or are they just Catholics in name of
probably some other variable other than just temperament?
So, Haley's asking if there's a resource for uncommon temperament combinations like choleric sanguine, but I don't think that's that uncommon.
Is there a resource?
With the choleric as a primary and sanguine as a secondary?
No, that's in the book. Oh, get our book here.
So Haley, the resource
phlegmatic would be hard.
Read this book.
Would be their book. So
we go through all the combinations.
Well, some better promoters of books.
You guys don't even have to promote it because I have been promoting it like crazy because this is such
Just like a good sanguine.
It was like, look, you go on a show and the people haven't read your work or they haven't this was.
And you can also get a game. We have a game you could play.
Yeah, we're gonna take that. We're gonna figure out a way to play it on our channel because with our audience.
Excellent.
Because we do our trivia show and we're like, all right, new game, let's do it. But yeah, guys, if you have not read anything on temperaments, especially, it really was such an insightful book. It was so enlightening. Rob, am I missing any questions before I give the final promo? Or Hope, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No.
Hope, you're very quiet tonight. Okay.
She's melancholic.
You're
What did Hope say? I'm sorry, I missed it. Yeah.
She was recovering from a migraine.
Yeah, so
I'm sorry.
yeah, Hope had a 24-hour migraine where she was in bed. I was just teasing her a little. So where can we actually get your books in the game? Do you guys have a website? Do we go on Amazon? Where should we go?
We do have a website, but you can go to sophiainstitute.com and you can get most of our books. This one is Amazon. You could get the kid book.
Yeah.
Well, you can get any of them on Amazon too, but some people are not going there. And we have a website that's called artandlarainebennett.com.
I'm going to say the book you held up before, The Temperament God Gave You, I bought the audiobook. I got through that book in 4 hours because if you played it like 1.3 speed, you could get through that book in 4 hours. It is such a compact
1.3 speed. Nobody else can.
Guys, I'm telling you, it's not like one of these long reads.
Read the book. Let's go.
You can't get through it. It is such a great book, a quick read. It reads fast. It's not like a boring.
I know the day you finished reading it because you came home. You were giving everybody the test and telling everybody what they thought they were.
Lorraine's a great writer.
That's true. We wrote it together.
Yeah.
My oldest and my youngest, we have down. My middle child, we're trying to figure out. She won't even answer the questions.
We're giving her
accurately.
the test. We're like, so we asked her a question. She's like, yes, no, I don't know. What?
I don't know.
Oh, that's funny.
So, Laraine and Art, this was such an awesome interview. You guys are so great for doing it with
thank
us.
you so
You guys are the
much.
best. Thank you very much.
This is awesome.
We were a little nervous coming into it because this is like the most serious show we've ever done. Pull my head.
Took his headphone out.
Yeah, it's the most serious show we've ever done. We usually goof around on here, but I really thought this book was so poignant that I actually wanted people to get something out of it. So we figured let's do it right. Brought the wives on to babysit us.
It's gonna help us.
Oh, thank you so much for having us
It's a lot of
on.
fun. Thanks a lot, you guys. Really appreciate it.
Do you guys have, besides the game, which I think is recent, do you have any other work or anything coming out soon or coming up?
Well, I just had a book come out. It's called The Little Way of Living with Less, Learning to Let Go with a Little Flower, which I didn't realize had so many alliterations in it. When I'm trying to say it. Anyway, it's about, decluttering and organizing and all that kind of stuff. That's Sophia Institute also. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Rob, did I miss anything? Because this I really enjoyed this interview, and I hope people go out and buy your book. And I'm going to read your next one because you guys have several, right?
Yeah.
Temperament God gave you. God gave your spouse.
Yeah.
God gave your kids.
The emotions God gave you. We wrote a book on emotions.
Yeah.
Okay.
We wrote a book on communication.
Yeah.
That's the one we got to get.
All right, we need that. We're gonna read that tonight. Right now.
We need the communication book.
Are you kidding? You both are sanguine. You communicate too much.
No, but we talk past each other, Rob.
No, we can't communicate.
Lorraine also wrote a book when her mom was passing away, like deep reflection for 365 for caregivers. She always had a beautiful book.
Yeah. Me and Nicole have been together since we're 15.
Wow.
So, yeah, she's my high school, middle school sweetheart, basically. So
excellent.
That's so great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where are you guys? Are you in the same place or separate?
We're sitting in New York in our den.
We're in New York.
And they're sitting in Minnesota.
Northern Minnesota.
Oh, Minnesota and New York.
New York.
Wow.
The Midwest.
Where are you guys?
We're in Virginia.
Virginia.
Okay.
The first time I've been on YouTube.
Oh wow! Yeah.
I have to tell you this.
I never zoomed before.
She would never do this. What I did was because she can't say no to anyone. So I said, Nicole, I told everybody you're coming on. She's like, I'm gonna kill you. I'm not coming. Like, I already told everyone you're coming. You can't
This was
disappoint
so
everyone.
nice. You made it really easy, and it was great.
You're natural, Nicole.
Oh yeah.
I'm terrible. I am so terrible. But Art and Laraine, thank you guys so much.
Thank
We're
you
going to
so
promote.
much. It's great.
We're
Thank
gonna have
you.
to-
A lot of fun.
Rob, you want to take us out?
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, before we go,
Oh,
just a few
yes.
housekeeping things. Next week, trivia that is now on Thursdays will be on the Meaning of Catholic channel instead of on our channel. So make sure you guys head over there for trivia at 8 p.m. Eastern next Thursday. And then we also want to remind everyone that our friend Robbie Brown, he's still without a job, still looking for a job. So we want to make sure to continue to push the Gifts and Go campaign that we created for him to keep him on his feet until he can find a job. So if you're able to donate at all, please head over to the Gifts and Go, donate there, or if you're not able to in these tough times, at least share it and definitely pray for Robbie and Robbie's family.
Yeah, Robbie's having a hard time. I spoke to him earlier. He needs help, and if there's one thing that we want to be able to do with this channel, it's help people. We got to be there for this guy right now. He really is having a hard time. He's not asking for something he shouldn't get or anything. So that's it. And let's not forget Hope's Etsy.
Oh yes,
And I hope
Yeah,
your
my
headache goes away too.
my wife makes sculptures of birds specifically that she sells on Etsy under the store name Blyton's Birds, which she put in the chat. So head over there for any Christmas gifts for any bird lovers in your family.
I even have
I want a bluebird. I
on a
want
baseball for any baseball fans.
Cool.
All right, is that it, Rob?
I think that's it.
All right, Art, Laraine, thank you guys so much.
Oh,
Hang out.
thank
We're
you so
talking in the
much.
room for a minute after Rob takes us out.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
Yo, take me back to my reversion. Unite the clans, I give thanks to each person. It's that same holy water that we immerse in. It's that same tradition that we all each verse in. United we stand and divided they win. They ignited in their plans and departed they sin. If you think about it and see us all for the same lands, their biggest fear is that we all remain friends. I got love for T Marsh and y'all podcast. I got love for Michael Matt fans. Ryan Grant, Rick Barrett, T Flanders, and Eric Sammons. Shout out to my boy John Erickson, avoid Babylon. I got love for Anthony and Rob Speak On. If you try, you're persecuted the same for the weak heart. Our rules go way back before the Genesis, the Greek ark, sweetheart. Yeah, this a mass of the ages. Shout out to Bishop Athanasius, Father Dave Nix.